Identifying and maintaining our spiritual paradise. Identifying and then maintaining our spiritual paradise. So we talk about paradise conditions today, and most of you folks have lived in areas where you can go and see something very, very attractive. Like in this country here, this area, I grew up in Fresno, or just south of Fresno. You can go up into Sequoias and see something good there. Of course, all of the other parks here in California. You can go to the shore, go up. We served up in Oregon, go along the Oregon shore. People go there, and they take pictures of that, and they take it around the world and make postcards out of it. That just shows you how beautiful the place really is. Now, back east, you had what they call the South Shore of New Jersey, which we never really got over into that area, but they say it was very nice. And you could go all around the world, and you see some beautiful things. Adam, though, had a paradise. But he had two. He had two kinds of paradise. He had the spiritual one and a physical one. Now we have to realize that, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. See, the spiritual paradise he had, and then he had the physical paradise. Now, which one of those did he lose first? Well, he lost the spiritual one. He lost his spiritual estate with God. We're going to go into that. And then once he lost that, then he wasn't qualified to stay in the garden, so he had to be ousted from that. Now, here's the lesson in this. Before you and I can get into the physical paradise that we talk about so much, we must come into the spiritual estate. We must come into a spiritual paradise. And if we don't get into the spiritual paradise now, see, under this system, then Jehovah's not going to say, well, we'll give you a chance on the other side. No, this is being done right now. And so we get into this spiritual estate. Now, what is that? Well, people sometimes say, well, you're in God's organization. Well, I'm baptized. I'm in the organization. That isn't really the spiritual paradise at all. The baptism, of course, is a good start on this. But when you come right down to it, the spiritual paradise is, of course, our being baptized, coming to know Jehovah. But it's like an umbrella word. See, that's an umbrella word, which means that it covers a lot of area here. And so technically, if you come under the shed blood of Christ, we come under the shed blood of Jesus, and if we're doing what Jesus would do if he was here, now we're in the spiritual paradise. So our service and meetings and all that, that's all a part of this. See, being in that spiritual paradisiac state. So we're interested in that. Now, let's go into this idea of what Adam had. Now, if you will, while we're finding Genesis chapter 2, which is not too difficult, Genesis chapter 1, really, let me just kind of set the pace for what this is going to be about here for a couple of minutes. In this country here, we have government. And we have to say probably the best form of government on the face of the earth today, other than the government of God, of course. But this government, you see, allows for freedom. It allows you and I to get out and preach the good news and do a lot of things that if you were in some other country, you may not have the freedom to do. So we look at this type of government, and some of it has some basis probably in the Bible. Now in this country, you have three forms or three facets of government. You have the executive, legislative, and judicial. Now, those are the three things, and they become like a bump-off system. They protect each other, and they protect you and I from that kind of government. Now, you have the legislative. Now, that's the president. The president has some measure of veto power. He'd like to have more, but it's not going to get too much more. So here you have, he's the executor, in a sense, of this whole matter. A very important man in the world. Second, of course, you have the legislative. Now, the word legislative or legislature indicates law being made. But you see, sometimes legislators make law that go beyond the reality of it. And it gets into an area in which it could then come and encroach upon your freedom and mine, and so therefore it would call for an appeal of that. And a revision of that. And so now you go to what's called the court of last resort, and that becomes the Supreme Court. And so some of the law then comes before the Supreme Court, and it's adjusted, because law should be made for the people, not people for the law. Now, let's go back in the Bible now. Let's see how this kind of government was what Adam enjoyed. See, he enjoyed that. And you and I, of course, can see the advantages. If there was proper and balance and perfection in all of these, it would be a great thing. And Jehovah, of course, is the one who has it all. Jehovah, of course, fills all of these offices. Okay, go over to Genesis chapter 1. And now you have verse 27. It says, "And God proceeded to create the man in the image, in God's image he created him, male and female he created them." Now, we use the term him and them here because the word Adam here or the word man is, if you look this up, the Hebrew word here is Adam, A-D-H-A-M, which means mankind. So Jehovah says that he made mankind, them, in his image. But you see, the fact that he's, through his creatorship, he becomes the executive office. He's the executor in all this. Now look at verse 16 of chapter 2. It says, and Jehovah God also laid this command upon the man. Now we have legislation. We have law. So Jehovah now filled the bill in giving law which is altogether proper. See, it was not going to hurt anybody. It was proper law. Now they violated the law, as we know. And so chapter 3, in verse 14, we bring in now the court of last resort. And Jehovah God proceeded to say to the serpent, because you have done this thing, you're cursed is the one of all the domestic animals. So now the judgment has been made, and there's no appeal to this because of perfection. There was no appeal to it. So now you and I can learn from this that you see, today we have a measure of appeal, but under God's new system there won't be. Now in this whole matter here of, we say this is Jehovah's arrangement of things. Now if, as we look back here, Eve, Satan came to her, and finally, of course, it says she was deceived. Back up here in chapter 3, in verse 5, he says to her, you won't die, verse 4. He says, God knows that in the very day of your eating from it, your eyes are bound to be open. Verse 6 says, consequently, the woman saw that the fruit was good. And then, of course, so she began taking of the fruit and eating it. Now, afterwards, she gave some to her husband when he was with her. Now, in this whole matter, did anything happen? Did anything happen here to Eve to cause her to say, this is kind of a bad thing I've done. I kind of feel a little queasy about this. Or anything. No, there's nothing happened. See, it's only in verse 7 when things start to happen. See, it says, then the eyes of both of them became open. They began to realize that they were naked and so forth. So it was only when Adam ate. Of course, he was the one who was really originally given the law. So the question now comes up. What if Adam had said to Eve, dear, you have done a dastardly thing. You've done something bad. And so what we have to do now, we have to go and talk to our Father about this. Because I'm not eating of this fruit, and I don't want you to. Throw that away that you got in your hand. And now let's go over here, and we're going to talk to Jehovah about that. See, now, what would have happened if he had said that? Is that a logical question? Sure it is. And do you know what? The Bible even covers it. Go over into the Hebrew, over into the law now. We're not going to have you look it up now, because you can look it up later. The law, under the law, says, now here's a woman, a wife, she says, I'm going to take a Nazarite's vow. And she could. It's like becoming an auxiliary pioneer today. So she could say, I'm going to be a Nazarite for a month, 2 months, whatever it is. And she would tell her husband that. Now, if her husband said nothing, if he said nothing, that vow stood. But what if he were to say to her, this is a bad time of the year for this. We're going to be working out in the field, and here you're going to be cutting some wheat maybe with the scythe, and all of a sudden, maybe there's a dead rabbit. See, if she touched the dead body, that would have canceled out this and would have made her feel bad. Or maybe if here she was cutting some grapes, and just inadvertently, without even thinking, maybe she liked grapes, reach up and get one and eat it. See, a Nazarite could not eat the product of the vine during that period of time. See, if he told her that nullified the vow. If Adam, had done this, possibly it would have nullified the vow. Because Jehovah, was very, very concerned about this whole matter. He was emotionally involved with this. And so, if they had come, something doubtless could have been worked out, and you and I wouldn't be in the shape we are today. See, just imagine what happened to Adam, Eve. Both of them must have been absolutely beautiful specimens of humanity. Must have been absolutely gorgeous. Now, we see ourselves today where it takes us about 80 years to do whatever's going to happen to us. Here you take young people, young children, young people up until they're, like 18, 19 years old. We talk about this at the assembly. So just beautiful people. Gorgeous. You look at young people, they're beautiful. I don't care whether they're boys or girls. They're beautiful. Look at their skin. Skin's tight. Skin's tight. You don't have the turkey's necks and all of this, that goes along with this thing. And so, but you see, and then as time will go by, all of this starts to happen, and it takes about 80 years. Imagine Adam and Eve, though. They were so gorgeous. And then as time would go by, and finally, can you imagine what the condition was when they became 930 years before Adam died? It must have been a horrible thing for them. Just to look back, you see, and look at what they had lost. So Jehovah, you see, he is very concerned about it. In fact, so concerned that he made a comment here in chapter 3 in Genesis, and I want to have you just go back here and read this with me. Verse 22. Now remember, the angels are the crowning glory in the invisible realm of messengers and worship and doing things. And now here on the earth, humanity, man and woman, would become the crowning glory. See, animals don't reason. Dogs and cats and horses and so forth. They're not reasoning and worshiping God, see, in this way. But humans could. And look what he says. Verse 22. It says, and Jehovah went on to say, here the man has become like one of us in knowing good and bad. And now in order that he may not put out his hand and actually take the fruit also from the tree of life and eat to time indefinite, comma, dash, end of quote, but no period. Now, is this a typographical error that we have found that nobody else has seen and that society hasn't seen it? Otherwise, they would have re-cranked this up and put a period there. No, that's not true. This is a literary form, and it's what we would refer to as an ellipsis. Look this up in the back of the Large Print Reference Bible under footnote words, and you'll find literary forms, and under this you'll come to what's called an ellipsis. Now, an ellipsis is this. Here you're very emotional. You get emotional about something, and you find that you can't finish a sentence. You're that emotional about it. Just come to the point where you can't go any further. Now, you illustrate. Let's say that you're one of the sisters, and you've got a little boy. Girls are just as bad. But boys, we always bring them up and say it's Johnny. Johnny's not. I mean, it just makes a bad name for John. But the fact is that here little boy, he's out in the yard playing. He's about 3. Maybe he's 4. I think he's 4. So here he's off out here playing in the yard. And so Mama says, Johnny, come on in the house. It's time to eat supper. Now, come on in the house. Wash your hands. Time to eat. And Johnny just keeps on playing because he likes what he's doing. And pretty soon, 15 minutes passes by. Johnny hasn't come. So she says, Johnny, come on in the house now. It's time to eat. Johnny just stays out in the yard. He's just playing. And pretty soon, Mama now, she's gotten aggravated about this whole thing. She says, Johnny, if you don't get in this house, you're going to... Now, that's an ellipsis. See, he knows he's going to get an ellipsis when he gets in the house. But see, that's beside the whole point. But you see, it was so emotional. What Jehovah was going to say here, we don't know. But he was so emotional because here, these people, they were going to father and mother an offspring that would bring praise and honor to God throughout eternity. And they didn't last long as a June frost. See, and here they were. They lost their life. And Jehovah knew that, you see. So that helps us to appreciate this. Now, when we look at all this and we talk about the time element, you see, we talk about this sometimes and we say, well, the new world is going to be here. It's 1,000 years of Christ's reign and all that. But it appears to us to be so long away. But did you know with Jehovah, it's already happened. It's already over, as far as Jehovah is concerned. Back up in chapter 3 in Genesis. Read the first prophecy with me in the Bible. Read the very first prophecy, 3:15. I shall put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He will bruise you in the head, you will bruise him in the heel. Now that last sentence tells you that it's all over. So you notice what it says. He will bruise you in the head. Jehovah was addressing the serpent. He says, he will bruise you in the head, you will bruise him in the heel. Now, when did the heel wound take place? A couple of thousand years ago. When will the head wound take place? Pointing in the future now, at least 1,000 years if you start counting right now. 1,000 years in the future. See, so Jehovah says this as though it's already happened. Just like if I were to ask you folks, what did you do Sunday? Oh, and you start telling me, oh man, we had a nice time Sunday. We went up here to Sacramento, and we went to Old Sacramento, we ate hot dogs and whatever else up there. Got sick. But it just ate up there. It's all we wanted to eat in Sacramento. And we almost ran out of gas. It was so high. We're trying to get to a cheap station. Almost ran out of gas. And then, oh boy, you should have been at our house for breakfast. My wife fixed such a great breakfast. No, here you're telling me all of these things. Oh, had a nice meeting too on Sunday. Now, is that the way it happened? No. You got up and had breakfast. You came to the hall. Then you went on up here and this. Almost ran out of gas coming home. See, that's the way it happened. But who cares? See, I didn't ask you about the sequence of things. I just said, what did you do? Jehovah now is saying here, the head wound, the heel wound, as though it's already there. You can take it to the bank, folks. Jehovah knows the end before it's all starting. And so you and I, when we talk about the new world, we can talk about it in reality. We can talk the resurrection in reality because, after all, it's a reality. Jehovah has already seen that it's there. And this planet will be housed, will be inhabited by people that will praise God, all of them servants of His, and that will be in the future. So, we have this matter now of Jehovah's recognition of all of this. And it's a great thing when we look at this and see the future. Now, where are we in the stream of time? Let's talk about the stream of time now for us in this matter. Now, we're going to do something a little different now with Scripture than we normally do. So open the Bible to the book of Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24. And what we want to do here now, we're going to take a word, 2 words in fact, and we're going to transliterate these words. We're not going to translate them, but we're going to transliterate them. And so now translation is where you have a word in a foreign language, and now you get a meaning of that in English or whatever language is you're speaking. So you take it out of a foreign language, now you bring it up, and you translate that and give a meaning here. But now we're going to transliterate, which means now not word for word, but letter for letter. Now that's, see, like the word Jehovah. Hebrew, YHWH, and we've Latinized it, so we have JHVH, which is Latin. But the actual letter for letter is YHWH out of Hebrew. It's a transliterated word. We put some vowels in there and make it where you can actually say it. But that's what you have. Now what we're going to do now is take Greek here, and we're going to transliterate that. And I think you're going to find it interesting. Matthew 24:3. It says, while he was sitting upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples approached him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your presence, and the conclusion of the system of things? Now, we want to take this word conclusion and transliterate. So when you get home now, you have you folks have the King Dominion at home. And so you go into the Matthew 24 here, and what you're going to find now, once you open it up, you have over to the right-hand column of it, you have a more narrow column, and that's the New World Translation. See, that's the New World. If you had the emphatic diglot, it's the same thing, except it has the King James Version over here. Now, above here, you have the little Greek squiggly letters. And below it, you have a translation of that. That's why if you tried to read this over here on the left-hand side of the page, it would be very difficult. So it's awkward reading, see, backwards for us. So what we're interested in, though, is little Greek squiggly letters. So now once you've written those off, you say, I can't understand them. You don't have to. So what you're going to do now is open up to the front. And you have here now, you have the Greek and English alphabet side by side. What corresponds to the English letters in our alphabet. There's just not that many of them in Greek. But you have they're side by side. So now what you're going to have here, once you look that up, you're going to have the word Syntelia. Syntelia. Now any letter or any word that starts in English with SYN or SYM means with. Like you have the word sympathy. With feelings. See, it's really what it means. So that word SYN, SYM, with. Now, the last of that is a conjugation of the Greek word that you'll find Matthew 24:14. Now, take that one. Take the word end. Now, transliterate that. And that word now is telic, T-E-L-I-C. Telic. The telic end is when the axe drops. Curtain is down, everything's over, play's done, everybody goes home. See, that's what that is, and that's the end. It says the good news will be preached, and then the telic end, the very last. But this here is a period of time with the end in it. It's a conclusion. See, if you used like a pencil, you could say that at the tapering off of the pencil, you can run your fingers out there and feel that. It's a tapering off. Come to a close. So during that, that's almost like saying that's the Syntelia, the pencil. Tapering off, time of the end. So Jesus was asked, well, what will be some of these things you would see? Okay, now keeping that in mind now, that we would say that we're in that Syntelia. But what would be happening to show that we're in that? Okay, now if you want to hold your thought there, you could. But back up now to the book of Daniel, chapter 12. And while you're finding Daniel 12, let me tell you why we're going to read Daniel 12. By the time Jesus came and was on the earth, Alexander the Great had come, did his thing 500 years earlier, and now his government and all had been splintered off. But the language, he had actually introduced the language, the Greek language. In that day, the common Greek was being spoken. Jesus, of course, spoke probably Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek because of his being perfect. But you see, the Hebrew language for the most now was becoming a dead language. And there was a need now to have the Hebrew part of the Bible to be read in common Greek. So you know what happened? 70 men set about to translate the Hebrew Scriptures into Greek. Now the word 70 in Latin is Septuagint. So now you have the Greek Septuagint, which is nothing more than the Hebrew Scriptures translated over into Greek. And so now if you and I were to say, I can take the Greek of the Hebrew Scriptures and read these words, and if you could read Greek, you could do that. Now we're going to be interested in reading Daniel chapter 12 in this case. So look here in verse 4. Chapter 12, verse 4. It says, "And as for you, O Daniel, make secret the words and seal up the book until the time of the end." If you are reading this in the Greek Septuagint, what would you have? You would have the word centellia. He says, make secret this until the time of the end, or the centellia of time. This period Jesus talked about as the tapering off, a period of the time with the end in it. It says, "Many will rove about, and true knowledge will become abundant." People will rove about, it says, not, as we say, driving around, but it would be the roving about through the Bible, through literature, because he says, "In true knowledge will become abundant." Now hold your thought there. Go over to verse 9, same chapter. It says that he went on to say, "Go, Daniel, because the words are made secret and sealed up until the centellia." Now, during this period of time then, during this period of time called the conclusion of the system, what should we expect? We should expect now to have an explosion of information concerning Bible text, Bible understanding, Bible language. Do we have? Absolutely. See, in 1947 you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, and being able to examine those and checking spellings and checking words and so forth. They had that. Of course, then you have various other now understandings of Bible language. We have manuscripts come to the fore and constantly being sought out and brought out. See, all during this period of time, now we have a better understanding of Bible and Bible prophecy and Bibles themselves. Now, to show you this, the importance of all of this is that now we're studying now tonight the book of Daniel. Could you and I have read the book of Daniel in the Bible 100 years ago and have an understanding of it? The answer to that's no. You can't do it. Because first of all, World War I, what we call today World War I, and it was called the Great War up to 1939. Then World War II came. They said, well, that was World War I. This is World War II. See, some of that is all a part of Daniel's prophecy. Could not have been understood 100 years ago. Could you have understood this march of world powers of all of these governments 100 years ago? No. Could you and I have understood the book of Revelation even 50 years ago? No. And we've just had this now recent. We've had a verse-by-verse analysis of the book of Revelation. See, all of this, the Bible has, during this period of time, what we would refer to as the conclusion, it's all just beginning to explode in information. And today, it's not unusual to sit down and be able to read the Bible and fit it into world happenings, which means very, very a lot for us as Bible scholars. So, see, even going back here into the Greek Septuagint, it helps us to understand what Jesus was really saying there. Now, go back over to Matthew chapter, in this case, chapter 13. Now, Jesus was giving an illustration here. He gave a number of them in Matthew 13. But in this case, he gave the one starting in verse 24. Notice he says, another illustration he set before them, saying, "The kingdom of the heavens has become like a man who sowed fine seed in his field." Now, you folks remember that illustration. And now his servants came after a bit, after things started to grow, and they said, "Didn't you sow fine seed?" And he said, "I sure did." They said, "Well, something's happened. You've got weeds coming up out here." He says, "Oh, a bad man did this. Came and oversowed with weeds." Drop down here now. Verse 28, they said a man did that. It says, "Do you want us then to collect and go out and collect them?" He says, "No, that by no chance while collecting the weeds, you uproot the wheat with them. Let them grow together until the harvest season. Then I'll tell my reapers, first collect them, the weeds and bind them and so forth." Now, this period of time, this growing together, what we would call the so-called Dark Age period, there's nothing happening. See, search as you will. There was no prophecies actually being fulfilled. There was prophecies running. 2,520-year prophecy was running. But there was none being absolutely fulfilled during that period of time, you see. Only when it come up to 1914, now the prophecy started unfolding, you see. And by what we refer to as the harvest season, 1919, then we were well underway. See, lots and lots of things were happening then, and is till this very day. Now, go over to, still in chapter 13. See verse 36. After dismissing the crowds, he went into the house. His disciples came and said, "Explain to us the illustration of the weeds in the field." Now Jesus goes about telling what it all means. He says, in response, the sower of the fine seed is the Son of Man, field is the world, fine seed is the son of the kingdom, the weeds are the sons of the wicked one, and the enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the centellia. Look it up, transliterate the word, it's the centellia of the system of things. See, so we're in this period from 1919 forward, and we find an organization, you see, has been brought forth on the world. Now, just to go back, if you will, we've got articles about this in the Watchtower magazines about this period that, when there was nothing happening. There was people that were great Bible readers, people that were great Bible scholars, and they wanted to keep the Bible up into modern languages and so forth. We read about them from time to time in the magazines, like Tyndall and Coverdale, some of these individuals that gave their life trying to make sure that the Bible was in modern language so that people could read it. We had individuals that was called, one of them called the quartodecimans. Now, in Latin, the word quarto is 4, and decimon, like in school, the teacher would say, move the decimal point over 1. Well, that means that's 10 points. So there's 4 and 10. They were called 14thers. They made an issue of celebrating the Lord's evening meal on Nisan 14th. But you see, they could have believed in a lot of other things. So there was no time during this period that we could say that there was an absolute truth brought out. There was no organization to draw people to. There was none. Now, at the harvest time, though, now an organization drawing people out of all of the world. And just to show you how that is mind-boggling, really. That we've got people out of all walks of life, races of humanity, coming together in one organization. This coming Sunday, when we sit down and read the Watchtower at the Kingdom Hall or at the Circuit Assembly, 95% of all persons that read the Watchtower will be reading the exact same article that you and I will be reading. It will be in a different language, maybe. But you have the other 5% of some of the smaller languages they're translating. But 95% will be reading the Watchtower, same as you and I are. Can any other organization do that? None. Political, religious, or otherwise. See, here we've got a group of people that's organized in bringing forth individuals, and we're able to come together. You could pick up your book, the Daniel book, and you could go over someplace else and study that throughout this country and probably in Canada, down in Mexico maybe. If you wanted to go take your knowledge book, we're going to be offering that tomorrow in service. Go over to Germany, offer the knowledge book. Same thing, just in a different language. We've got a powerful organization. We never want to sell this short. And it's as a result of this harvest season where we are. This is the centellia of time. We're getting close to the end of it. We have individuals sometimes that associate with us, and they are what they admire the spiritual paradise. And they'll tell you right away, oh, this is a great organization of people. I love these people. I like them because they're honest. I like them because of this and whatever it is. But you see, they don't want to be a part of us. They'll always stand at a distance and admire and enjoy association. They like what they hear. But until they can actually become a part of us, they will never appreciate it. It's like in Paul writes in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, where he talks about the spiritual man. But he says in the physical man, says all the things are foolishness to him. Things are foolishness to him. And some of the things we do, and the things like in our Daniel book tonight, we talked about how that we take a stand on certain things. See, we take a stand on issues of dress, grooming, flag salute, and so forth, because we recognize, see, that we need to be different from the world. People look at us and they say, well, you people are different. You're strange. They can pick us out right away. We can pick each other out. But they pick us out and they say, well, you people are just sort of strange. We are. There's no two ways about that. We're strange. But on the other hand, we're different than the world, which makes us then pleasing to Jehovah. Our whole circuit assembly talks about that in the matter of being different with personality. Let me just draw your attention to a couple of points. The theme, as you know, is Colossians 3:10. We're going to have some material here. The school, bring along your school material. But the 145, manifesting aspects of the new personality by proving what one's own work is within the family, being loyal soul in the congregation and in the field ministry. Brother Hood has the talk, discipline yourself to meditate properly. There's a difference in meditating and daydreaming. Most of us daydream when we're trying to meditate. We get off on something else. And then education that molds our new personality. The public talk, are you conquering the wicked one? Down-to-earth material. Just sort of down to earth. I like it. I think it's just nice stuff to talk about. And so that's good. And then keep yourself without spot from the world. Brother Hood has that. Daily renewing the man we are inside as a concluding talk. So come over. You folks are just real close, so be sure and be over. And by the way, be sure and talk about the assembly to Bible studies, return visits, magazine route calls, because they're so close. See, it's just a stone's throw away. And so encourage them to come and hear the public talk on Sunday. Just advertise it and say, look, why don't you come over and see our assembly hall and come to the public talk and be able to enjoy that. Well, folks, I think we've made all the announcements and discussed all of this. So we'll look forward to seeing as many as possible out tomorrow. And even if you can't go in service, still come out and be with us. It's an encouragement to us and yourself. And then, of course, in the afternoon, bring your BE book for that. And so we look forward to being with you. So let's close by singing a song together. We have Song 74, I believe, has been selected. Song 74. And if you'd like to arise, you may. And then we'll ask Brother Hood to represent us a word of prayer afterwards.